What Lauren and I are trying to do is find ways to make the infrastructure that you have and the resources that are available to you now work and provide more revenue paths. Because I think that's what owning an independent theater is all about.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Loria, editorial director of Boxoffice Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. And in this week's episode, I'll be speaking with Lauren McChesney and Matthew McClanahan, the co-owners of Shankweiler's Drive-In, a great institution in Pennsylvania that has been operating a drive-in there for many, many years. Lauren and Matthew came into the business in 2022 and reopened it. Their new management has seen some great success over there. They have doubled their attendance of folks between the ages of 18 to 34. So we'll be going into that recipe for success that they've had over at their drive-in in the feature segment. But before we get there, we've got an Oscars recap with Chad Kennerk from Boxoffice Pro and Albert Lawrence. Albert, welcome back. It's always good to see you here, man.
I love hanging out with y'all. We get a chance to nerd out so much about what's happening in front of the screen, but also behind the scenes here. So thanks for having me.
You're also our ringer because I did not watch the Oscars. I was too busy playing indoor soccer, as I do every Sunday night, and could not be bothered to work for free. But thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Chad, you're a big fan of this event. How did this rank in the world of post-pandemic Academy Awards?
It was good. I enjoyed the show. I think it's a little bit of an odd year. There were some tech glitches with Hulu, so some people lost seeing the last two awards of the night, which was unfortunate.
Like the important ones, right?
The biggest awards, yeah. And one of the biggest upsets, I would say, with Best Actress.
Wow. Well, let's get into it, guys, because this is highly relevant. This is probably the most that exhibition has been spoken about in positive terms, we have to say it, since the post-pandemic period. Leave it to Sean Baker to come in with a truly independent film like Anora, come out with 4 awards, and give maybe the most resounding pro-theatrical voice that we've heard in a long time in this industry. Sean Baker, a huge, huge supporter of the theatrical experience, listener of this podcast, has been on, has listened to a number of episodes, has been in our magazine. We're big fans of Sean and his work, but most of all, we're big fans of the message that he is putting out in the industry in support of movie theaters. But he wasn't the only one. As I understand that there was just a lot of pro-theatrical sentiment, including a comedy bit from Conan O'Brien. Chad, how did that land? Were movie theaters the butt of a joke or part of the joke?
No, I think movie theaters were in on it. I feel like culture was the butt of the joke, like where we are today with streaming. Conan O'Brien put together this bit called Cinema Streams. And the quote was, "Are you tired of streaming movies from your couch, from your kitchen, from your hand? What if I told you there's another way to stream movies in a building that's dedicated to streaming movies? Welcome to Cinema Streams. We took 800 smartphones and glued them all together and made one giant smartphone." So it was a great bit.
And I think that it went over very, very well in the room. I'm not sure what the Netflix contingent, I'm not sure how many laughs were coming from that group over there, but I think that the house that he was playing to was very, very receptive to it. And just even watching this from home on television, you get it. You absolutely get it.
Yeah. My favorite part was the woman kind of reaching out, like trying to figure out how to play it. And they said, "No, we played the movie for you."
It's great. Everything old is new again. Yeah.
That's good to hear. And really, I think a lighthearted way to approach the conversation this year. And of course, the awards and the award winners had the loudest voice of them all. Let's go over the biggest surprises for you guys. On a personal level, I have never really been a big fan of the awards. I really struggle with the idea of prizing a film as best. You know, we have our favorites, and I, like everybody else, come out with a top 10 list, top 15 list every year. But to have an award like this, I really wonder what the use of it is, other than promoting films that wouldn't otherwise get seen, which is important, and promoting film-going culture, movie-going culture. Looking at the candidates this year, I think the candidates reflected a diverse group of movies from huge studio tentpoles like Dune Part 2 and Wicked, to truly independent films and foreign films. You had I'm Still Here, the Brazilian title, the aforementioned Anora that won Best Picture, hugely ambitious movies like The Brutalist. Really, every other film, Nickel Boys, I can't forget about my top pick of the year. Absolutely love that movie. That was on there. So I was really happy with how everything turned out. Now, I don't know if it's positive or negative that a movie like Anora won. I'm more leaning towards it's a good thing in the fact that this was a film that was given a full theatrical window by Neon, a very robust theatrical window that kept it in theaters well after it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, kept it as part of the cultural conversation, and it was able to ride that wave into a Best Picture win. I understand the criticism that I have heard from the outside that, hey, a film that wasn't widely seen, like Anora, which I think is a huge success in the context of Sean Baker's movies, in the context of maybe specialty art house release. I still think it's a massive success. What are you expecting? I understand the folks that are saying, well, we would have liked something with a higher budget that maybe more people would have seen to win Best Picture. I get it. I respect that. Ultimately, I am happy that Anora won. I am happy that people have heard about this movie and can go out to theaters to watch it. But I do want to hear your impression and your take on it. Is it an issue that a film with, let's say, limited recognizability will come out of an award show like this as the Best Picture?
I think that when we're considering the Oscars, just as you mentioned before, I know that sometimes there can be this discomfort with labeling anything as like the best film, especially when we're discussing art, right? But if we wanted to talk about the film that was the most popular, then perhaps that would be Wicked, perhaps that would be Dune Part 2. If we wanted to talk about the film...
But that's not the award. The award isn't called most popular.
Exactly. I mean, and remember, for a moment, the Academy was toying around with that idea of actually having an award specifically for that kind of thing, and we all cringed at that moment. So I feel like it's very difficult to have it both ways, to have a film that's just completely being assessed, again, I do all of this in quotation marks, but really being viewed and celebrated for just its artistic merit versus, well, what's the thing that the most people have seen? What's the thing that's going to drive the most views to the show? So I think that the Oscars is always doing this really difficult balancing act. And I think that the show itself really did a beautiful job with that this year. I know that going into this, a lot of us didn't think that Wicked was going to win Best Picture. A lot of us didn't think that Dune Part 2 was going to win. But the show producers knew we need to get people to watch this show. So in terms of making a show, they crushed it by opening up with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, giving us that Wicked / Wizard of Oz / The Wiz music that we'd love to hear. They started off so strongly, so robustly. And this year, instead of having the nominees for Best Original Song perform, they went ahead and nixed all of that right out the gate. And I think that they were very strategic with that because they knew, like you mentioned, this was a year where there weren't as many widely seen movies, and especially like not even as many widely seen nominees. So shout out to Amelia Perez for taking home the statue for Best Original Song, but a lot of folks didn't see that movie. A lot of folks maybe don't even have, maybe have never even heard El Mal, which is the song that won for that. But all of us have heard Defying Gravity at this point. All of us have heard Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So I think that just, balancing the smaller films, but still with some large production value for us as viewers to come on. And I think that worked on out.
For you, Chad, do you think that Anora's Best Picture win spells the right momentum for the industry, or is it a little bit of a hurdle in terms of getting those moviegoers back engaged with this award show and this industry?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it could go either way. I think when you look at last year, when you have something like Oppenheimer taking the stage, there's much more of a perhaps united celebration in that, where I think now it opens the doors for anyone who hasn't seen Anora to maybe seek that out. It's a balance between recognizing the films that most of the audience is connected with and knows, and also inviting audiences to go to the movie theaters and experience some of these films that they haven't.
For me, I think it's a great statement in the sense that the model that has worked for 100 years plus in distribution and exhibition can still be impactful. And let's be very clear about it. Anora was never built to be a $100 million or $50 million movie at the box office. It wouldn't be the movie it is if it had been that sort of accessible title. And I'm happy that it wasn't. I also think Neon did a fantastic job marketing Anora. I think the heights it hit at the box office, while modest in comparison to other titles that are usually nominated for this award, is hugely important. I think it hit important benchmarks in the marketplace. I think it was marketed as a film that you had to see exclusively in theaters. And that continues to be the case for the foreseeable future. And I hope it creates a nice little bump for the title. I don't think that the box office should be at all a concern for anyone involved in making or awarding or voting for these films. But if anything, it's these award shows that we have to use and leverage to help the box office of these titles. It's not the relationship isn't the other way around, right? Where box office helps you win awards. No. That's upside down. It's the award shows that help you reach new heights at the box office. That's what we want to see. And that's why I love these titles as diverse as this being nominated. And it's lovely to see a truly independent film with a legitimate theatrical window walk away with as many awards as it did, and someone like Sean Baker, who has really come out of the DIY filmmaking school and has now reached these heights in his career. And you know what? It's easy for a filmmaker of huge tentpoles to say that, to use that platform and say, watch my movies in a theater. From a filmmaker that comes from the independent world like Sean Baker does, to say, I know my movies are hard to reach. I know my movies aren't entirely accessible, but I make them for theaters. For a guy that could easily take the bag that Netflix is seemingly offering anyone with a pulse and say, you know what, I'd rather do things my way and still get something like this, I think it's very touching. I'm happy with the results. But let's talk about the show a little bit more. In terms of big shocks, surprises, plot twists, Chad, what ranks as the top moment for you? Outside, of course, of the Sean Baker wins.
I think the biggest shock for me was certainly Best Actress. I was rooting for Demi. I was very disappointed that she didn't win.
In terms of winners, same thing with you, Chad. I think that a lot of us had Demi Moore as winning in our pools. She had really crafted this beautiful narrative ever since the Golden Globes when she picked up her award there, that, hold on, this is really a welcome back to the community for Demi Moore. This is almost like a redemption story for her. And I know that Mikey Madison at first had so much buzz with Anora coming out of Cannes, but Demi had picked up so much steam that I'd forgotten how much of a lead that Mikey had at the beginning. I did get a little nervous, though, for a moment. I thought that Timothée Chalamet might eke out a victory over Adrian Brody because of his performance at the SAG Awards. But in the end, Adrian got a chance to pick up his second one.
That's good to see. Now, I know there was a weird sort of relationship in terms of musical numbers that were performed. I can understand and applaud, I think, as you mentioned, Albert, when you have the Stars of Wicked, which have a second part coming later this year, going on stage, singing a couple songs. That's cool. Why are we doing James Bond songs? What happened? Was there like an anniversary? Did someone cut a check? What's going on there?
I think the goal was to celebrate Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli stepping away and retiring. I think that was the goal, was to celebrate the work that they've done. It also created, I thought, a little bit of an awkward scenario, given that we don't know what's happening with that franchise in the future moving forward.
So they had Halle Berry come out and introduce the segment. And Halle Berry, I'm a huge fan. She is phenomenal. And I think if you are going to have somebody who's been in a Bond film come out, like, she's who you want to be the face of that for the moment. But it still wasn't completely clear to me. And I think actually for most of the viewers at home, I don't know if they even are aware of the Amazon kind of new shepherding of the franchise. So that wasn't something that was explicitly stated during the show. There were some Amazon jokes at the very beginning. Conan did a beautiful job with those jokes, but there was no real discussion about a torch really being passed off to this next one. So I feel like it's like, if you knew, then you knew. But if you didn't know, then you were probably very quizzical about, like, why do we have Doja Cat on the stage singing, a Shirley Bassey song from a Bond film? Not exactly sure. And why isn't Adele here performing Skyfall?
There's no, that's a great question, actually. I think that would have been interesting. So there's no upcoming movie. There's no actor attached to the role. There's no release date. It's something that's 100% up in the air, but we took a moment to celebrate its influence. I mean, I get it. I understand that you're doing things to reach this wider audience that we're talking about. It's really hard to sell a 3-hour awards show with movies that aren't huge tentpoles. So I understand and I applaud the fact, like, hey, let's make this more accessible. And when it comes to the awards, let's reward the films that matter, the films that are relevant. I kind of like that mix. I'm not going to knock that. But I do wonder if people over a certain age understand that the James Bond franchise is maybe less relevant than they think it is. It's maybe not the best let's draw in younger viewer type of deal.
Yeah.
Internationally, maybe we have to think about that. But yeah, ultimately, that's not something for us to figure out. People that make a lot more money get to make those mistakes for us. Let's move on to the comments that the head of the National Association of Theater Owners made following Sean Baker's wins at the Academy Awards. Michael O'Leary, president and CEO of NATO, saying, quote, "Over the years, Sean Baker has been an unwavering champion of the theatrical experience, and we congratulate him and his team, as well as our friends at Neon, on their well-deserved Oscar wins tonight. Sean's passion for movies on the big screen resonates with moviegoers around the world. We cannot wait to see what he dreams up next, and when he does, everyone in theatrical exhibition will be standing at the ready to help movie fans see it as intended on a big screen." That is the quote from NATO President and CEO Michael O'Leary, reacting to the Academy Award wins from Sean Baker, director of Anora. All in all, I think a successful evening. Since I didn't watch the telecast, I wonder if there were any trailers for upcoming films, anything that we got to see in terms of moviegoers to be able to point to and say, I want to watch that next.
Not a lot, Daniel. There were, I want to say in chat, I feel like I counted, were there 2 actual theatrical film trailers?
There was a ballerina trailer, and there were lots of, big companies stepping in doing movie themed commercials. I do appreciate in terms of trying to shine a spotlight on the movie making process and what's happening behind the scenes and all of those craftspeople. Yeah, but there weren't a lot of big trailer drops. I think it was all content we've seen.
Yeah, I feel like there may have been a trailer for The Amateur, the upcoming film with Rami Malek in it. But yeah, like this was not the Super Bowl, Daniel.
You'd think that a show that targets people that like watching movies would market movies. God forbid. You'd think that would be a great opportunity to spend a little bit of money. But we are in the middle, we have to say it, of a really, really tricky period in the marketplace. March is going to be slow, guys. It's going to be a long slog until the release of Disney's Snow White, which is really the only wide release of note this month. We'll be providing updated forecasting on Disney's Snow White in the coming weeks. As of today, we're tracking that opening between 60 and 70 million. Again, not great, but it is going to be the only inflection point here through the end of the quarter. But let's go through the March titles that we have on the schedule, guys, and maybe we can preview what exhibitors can expect coming out in theaters. I haven't seen Mickey 17. It looks fun. It looks upbeat, maybe a little off kilter. I don't think it's going to recreate some of that Parasite magic. The last Rotten Tomatoes critics score I saw was hovering around the high 80 percentile, which is great. It's very positive for it. I know Rebecca Pauley saw it recently. I don't want to speak for her, but I know she was a little bit less than enthusiastic about it, and she's a big fan of the filmmaker. Unfortunately, I think, like we said, that doesn't really track to be one of the bigger films this month. So let's move on to the films now opening on March 14th. We've got a trio of titles, guys. They're all going to have to add up to something close to 30 million. I'm not even sure we'll get there. I think between Opus from A24, Black Bag from Focus Features, and Novocaine from Paramount, the 3 of them might add up to 25 million that weekend. All 3 combined. Not ideal, all very different type of movies. If I were to pick one out of the bunch, I'd go with a Soderbergh thriller, which is Black Bag, which I actually have seen quite a bit of advertising for, but I think that's because they're targeting people like me for that. Opus seems like hasn't been getting a lot of support. And Novocaine shows up in the random college basketball games I watch, but not much else. What do you guys know about this trio?
Yeah, and actually, I think on the 14th, is that also when the Looney Tunes movie is dropping as well?
Yeah, but I mean, like, how many screens?
Yeah.
I'm glad someone picked it up. I don't want to knock it, but the question right now is, can you open it wide? There's a lot of movies that come out every weekend. Until we see more bookings, and we're still a distance away from me being confident on that title, I don't think it's going to play a major role that weekend.
Well, then out of the three that you mentioned, then the one that I'm most excited to see is Opus. And like, it's A24. You know, A24 doesn't steer us wrong too often. I love Io Debris. She can do no wrong right now. I think that her taste in doing films and in doing television is just really immaculate. And so I think that my chips are going to go on that. Now, will that be the one that draws in the most dollars this weekend? I'm not sure about that. Black Bag may have it there. But for me, my ranking would be most excited to see Opus. Then I'd love to see Novocaine. Jack Quaid really just hamming it up in here. I think he's been having a fun time at the box office, coming right off of Companion. Good year for him so far. And then I'd put Black Bag. Look, I love a good Mr. and Mrs. Smith style film. Cate Blanchett, Michael Fassbender. I mean, come on, they just like ooze appeal. So yeah, that would be my 1, 2, 3.
How about you, Chad? What are you picking on that weekend?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing all three of these. I'm going to be talking to Robert Olson and Dan Burke, the directors of Novocaine. So I am excited to see this high concept action thriller, and which I've heard is very, very gory. So that'll be lots of body horror. So that'll be interesting. But I'm always Cate Blanchett's one of my favorite actors. So I'm always down to see her in anything. She can read me the phone book. I don't care.
I agree. I'm a huge fan of Cate Blanchett's. Now, moving on to March 21st, Snow White coming out that weekend. Pairing it is a counter-programmer from Warner Brothers, Alto Nights, starring Robert De Niro, gangster movie that nobody's heard of, and I don't think I've seen a single still, trailer, poster. Has there been a rare sighting of Alto Nights being promoted anywhere for you guys?
I think just the trailer online. I've seen the trailer online in multiple
that
places.
exists apparently. Yeah. I wish I had better news here to round out the month. We've got something called The Woman in the Yard from Universal Pictures and Death of a Unicorn, which actually, okay, I'm going to give props to Death of a Unicorn, A24 quirky comedy. It premiered at South by Southwest. People have seen it. There's some reviews online, that can pick up some solid business. But really, a combo of titles that, again, maybe make 20, maybe make 25 million combined over their opening weekend. Slow going, really, outside of Snow White in March.
Yeah, but look, with Woman in the Yard, you can never count Blumhouse out. So if we're going to do horror, if we're going to do branded horror, then I think that we'll at least be able to get some good jump scares out of that.
We've got that Blumhouse title closing out the month. And that's, sorry, it sounds like we're out of ideas, but we're really struggling to prop this slate on its feet here because the studios have given us next to nothing. It's been even hard getting long lead screenings so we can actually write about these things. To know anything about them, you have to, go into YouTube and know what these movies are to begin with. I don't mean to make it sound dire, but we're going to end this quarter with a thud. Because if Snow White doesn't overperform, maybe we hit even to last year over year. And it's a result of the movies that are available here. I feel let down by what we had in the first quarter. I genuinely feel let down. And I think there were a lot of expectations coming into 2025, but we've been saying this for months. We've been saying this since, I think, December of last year. You've got Dogman at the end of January. You've got Captain America with all of its reshoots and issues that it has been dragging from the MCU in the middle of the quarter. And near the end of the quarter, you've got Snow White. And in between, you're going to cross your fingers for an overperformer. And we just haven't had that overperformer. I was hoping something like The Monkey would do business like, let's say, like a Longlegs did, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. It didn't. Too bad. I was hoping Mickey 17 would be able to come in the post-Academy Awards frame and pick up a lot of traction. It doesn't look like it's going to do that. I think it's a disappointing first quarter, and we have to brace ourselves because right now we're in a situation where April better perform for this to get in a much better shape, because waiting until Memorial Day for the box office to heat up isn't something that we can get used to. We did that last year.
Yeah,
it didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And at least last year, Chad, we had a Ghostbusters, we had a Dune Part 2 in there.
Fall Guy did business.
I can't look at Snow White and Captain America and Dogman and say, yeah, those movies overperformed. If anything, they kind of met expectations, but nothing near what those other titles did.
Do you think that Captain America is going to be able to eke out like one more number one spot for this upcoming week?
Captain America, we forecasted to do 14 million last weekend. It ended up at 15. I'm not sure if it can muster up enough money to finish at number one. If it does, I will tell you this, Albert, it's because Mickey 17 tanked. The only way Captain America gets another weekend is if Mickey 17 performs that poorly, which it might. And that's the scary part, which it might.
I feel like Robert Pattinson still does have a really strong fan base that supports him doing weird and avant-garde things. And this could be that, especially with the accent that he's employing in these trailers.
I would love to see that. And getting that fan base, I think, is a crucial component for this weekend to be good for exhibitors all over this country. And that's why in this week's feature segment, I'm speaking with the Shankweiler Drive-In Theaters, Matthew McClanahan and Lauren McChesney. They came into the business in 2022, taking over this historic drive-in location and have really targeted younger audiences to come back and enjoy that drive-in experience year-round. As I mentioned a second ago, they doubled their attendance from people ages 18 to 34 last year, which was a down year for the entire box office. They found a way to re-engage those younger audiences, and we had to bring them on this podcast to speak a little bit about their experience, not only with getting that demographic, but also getting their feet under them in this business in the post-pandemic scenario. So please join us after this break for my interview with Shankweiler Drive-Ins, Matthew McClanahan and Lauren McChesney. And we're back here on the Box Office Podcast with the co-owners of Shankweiler's Drive-In, Matthew McClanahan and Lauren McChesney, joining us here. First time on the podcast, guys. I'm so happy to have you. You guys have one of the cooler stories on getting into this industry. I want to dig right into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about you guys and your decision to become theater operators, because I know, Matthew, you had been working at a drive-in. That's where you met Lauren. And then how does that go from let's buy a drive-in movie theater in 2022?
It was kind of a long progression. So in 2020, I kind of went off on my own and did pop-up exhibition for shuttered theaters that were closed during the pandemic. And that became a full-time job for a couple years, where I would team up with not only theaters, but museums and municipalities to provide safe outdoor exhibition. And having that background of having run a drive-in previously and that experience, it just sort of was a natural progression. When Laura and I first started dating, we took a road trip across the country on the historic Route 66.
Like right after we started dating.
Which is, if you ever want to test your relationship, get a little old car and drive across the country. That's a great way to get to know your significant other.
But we stopped at a whole bunch of drive-ins on the way, and we found one that was abandoned at the time, and we were looking at it, and we were like, this would be amazing if we owned it. And then kind of the rest of the car trip, we were talking about what it would be like if we owned our own drive-in, what we would want to do with it. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And somebody owns that one now. They revived it. It's great.
Yeah.
It wasn't us.
I'm glad they found a home, and I'm glad you guys found your own drive-in. Now, I know that Matthew had been working in drive-ins before, and obviously he had the history of being involved in pop-up exhibition. Lauren, the first ever drive-in experience you went to, the guy that took your ticket is standing right next to you and is now your life partner and business partner.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a good trip to the movies. I think that was a good investment of your time.
It's interesting how it turned out. So I didn't grow up going to drive-ins. I'm a military kid, so we moved everywhere, didn't live anywhere where there were drive-ins. So I didn't go to one until 2018, I think, was the first time I ever went to a drive. I mean, and that's when I met Matt. So still new to
And
this.
well, it's crazy for me that not only does this big life event happen, you find a person that you fall in love with and you build a life with, but 4 years after your first drive-in experience, you own one now. You have to worry about everything top
Yes.
to bottom. Now, can you walk me through how that experience was? Finding the site of Shankweiler's in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in the Lehigh Valley, and then everything that kind of led into you guys opening. Did you guys open on the date you wanted to? Because as we all know, the drive-in business can be very seasonal and can be a little bit tricky
Yes.
depending on when you open.
So our original plan was to open a new drive-in. That had been our pursuit for probably a couple of years prior to purchasing Shankweiler's. It really wasn't until a local news article came out that the owners of Shankweiler's were really motivated to sell the theater, and they were signaling that they were prepared to sell to a developer if they could not find another operator to take on the mantle. And for me personally, Shankweiler's is a childhood theater. I grew up going to it, so I have that attachment to it. But we also were very aware of its price tag, and one of the biggest challenges of buying a drive-in specifically is they typically sit on large swaths of commercial land in rapidly growing areas, which means they're very expensive. And typically the land value exceeds the present business value. So we had to basically go in and take a look at the business and then figure out how we can squeeze more revenue out of it and prove to a bank, hey, this is still viable to sit on this land here. This can sustain a mortgage. This can pay the bills and be a thriving business despite this, inflated land value. And so that was a big challenge, but we were really motivated by, not only my personal attachment to the theater, but the fact that, it's also historically significant as the oldest drive-in operating.
Going back to a question I asked a second ago, did you guys hit your date, or did you
No.
guys have to plan ahead, or how did you get to that opening weekend?
It was just delayed.
We started the process of the very beginning of starting the process of buying the drive-in in February of 2022, and we didn't close on it. Yeah, we didn't close on it till November. And there was just a lot of legal setbacks. There was a lot of delays with financing. There was a lot of delays just between negotiation. And so we ended up closing on it on November 4th, which is after the typical drive-in season. But we were coming in immediately having to make loan payments. So we didn't really have a choice. We opened up and we managed to pull it off in 1 week. So we closed on November 4th, right? And then we opened on November 11th.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
1 week turnaround.
Yeah. We had to set up our point of sale. We had to rehire staff. We had to learn how to use equipment, learn how to use the projector, get a movie, get a booker, do literally everything. And it was very exhausting.
Quickly get heat in the bathrooms because we're heading into winter.
It wasn't meant to be open.
Was not open in the winter. Yeah. So we're just like, all right, we got to quickly get this place winter ready and
So we opened with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. We had some news coverage locally and people showed up and it was great. It went pretty well, especially considering we weren't entirely sure what we were doing. It turned out great, I think. And then a week later, the projector died.
No.
And we're in just a nice sweet spot where the nearest tech is like an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So I had to very quickly learn how these things work inside and out. So
we're fortunate that Matt is the kind of guy who can take everything apart and put things back together. And he's very good at learning mechanical, computer-y stuff. But immediately we had this setback where Matt's surrounded by parts of a projector. And thank goodness we still had a little bit of time on the warranty.
The warranty was literally less than a year out of expiring, and we had all of these technical malfunctions.
But then we got back up and it was okay.
Yeah. It's an operations boot camp. Listen, 1 week to get all of this up and running is not easy at all. What was the most valuable lesson that you guys picked up from week one that you still hold true to this day?
From week one.
From week one. Just keep going forward.
I think
just keep going.
The advice I tell everybody and that I tell myself and that seems relevant is that nobody actually knows what they're doing about anything. People just pretend that they know. So we were like so stressed out and like it was a blur, trying desperately to figure out how to make it work. But to other people, we looked like we really had it together and that we were like very professionally like ready to open. And they were like, oh, you must have been planning this for a while. And we're like, yeah, totally. No.
It's not impossible. And I think you guys have proved it now in operation for over 2 years. When did you guys feel that confidence of saying, you know what, we've got our feet under us. It's not just adrenaline and panic driving us through this. Or are we still in the adrenaline and panic mode? Because I think a lot of exhibitors never leave that mode.
We're at a point where I don't want to say it's more predictable, but we kind of understand the ebbs and flows of the business better, that we can better prepare for things like, our summertime sellouts to the winter lull, and we can budget for it, and we can kind of understand when those peaks and valleys occur. And that's really important just for our sanity to kind of know, like, in the summer when things are crazy, when we're 7 days a week and we're selling out every weekend and we're burning out, we know there's going to be a period of 6 months where we're going to be pulling our hair out of our head, hoping for a busy night. So we know that, and when we're in that period, that dark time that's really slow and cold, the summer is coming and the tide will shift again. So just kind of that assurance to know that there are these just sort of natural rhythms to the business, completely out of our control. We're just sort of riding with it. That has provided us with a semblance of comfort. But yeah, very much it's still a lot of adrenaline and panic.
It was also, we came into this industry at quite possibly one of the worst times. Like coming out of the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of there weren't a ton of movies to show. And then with the work stoppage, then that also limited it. So our first 2 years, it's not like we were like rolling in these hugely profitable movies. Like we did okay. So for a little bit, it was like, are we doing this wrong? Or is this just the way the industry is going? And trying to figure out how best to navigate through that, even though it was still brand new to us. So I think last year when everything started picking up with Inside Out 2 specifically, I think that's when we started feeling like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like, and we're doing this right, and everything's okay.
We'll get ready for the summer because I do expect us to have another big bounce back. We're in the middle of one of these dark lulls right now. The better times are around the corner, warmer weather is as well. And I want to hear a little bit more about that recovery that you guys had in 2024. Something that, Lauren, you mentioned on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago is that in 2024, you guys doubled your admissions from people ages 18 to 34, which was your target demo when you reopened Shankweiler's. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys got to that? Because anyone in this industry, anywhere in the world, that's one of their targets. You guys were able to pull it off in year one.
Yes. For us personally, I think TikTok really is what got us there. Social media in general, but especially we got involved on TikTok. And that introduced the drive-in to a whole new demographic that hadn't really been aware of it previously or just hadn't been interested in it previously.
So we kind of approach our business in a very open book, kind of heart on our sleeve fashion that really resonates with the younger audience and kind of plays into this, both the nostalgia, but also kind of adds a personal touch where Lauren and I, we're the ones running the theater, but we're also the ones in front of the camera telling you what we're doing and why we're doing it and how things work. So not only are we telling you what movies we're playing, but I'm going to take you in the projection room and tell you, oh, this is what we do for an open caption night. Oh, this is how we, decide to run a movie this way. There is that kind of open book that we find that young people really kind of grab onto. If it's personal and they can connect to it and they can see a face associated with the organization, they are more attracted to it because it's like, oh, I saw you guys on TikTok. Now I'm at the theater and here you are. like you're real. You're actually here. It's not just like a big corporation. We're just two people doing a cool thing.
It has to be genuine. I think that's absolutely right. I think no matter if you're a huge circuit or, a one location drive-in like yourselves, if it comes from an honest place, I think the consumer, especially younger consumers on social media, really buy into that. I mean, I think of examples like, let's say, Marcus Theaters, one of the top 5 chains in the country. They have Greg Marcus, the CEO of the group, going out before the movies start, welcoming you he's eating the popcorn, he's in the seats. I think that really does connect and break through to audiences in a very relevant and meaningful way. Now, a big part of this is also content, right? Programming. And when you have to start everything from nuts to bolts, right? Make sure that you guys are all set up, your audio solutions there, point of sale is there, concessions. You also have to figure out the film booker question. Lauren, that's one thing you mentioned, like, hey, we need someone in here in making sure that we get movies, because that's another huge challenge that I keep on hearing from independent operators. They say it's wide, but since when is a wide release 1,800 screens, right? Since when is this available to my competitors and not to me? How have you guys managed that situation and made sure your programming connects with that target demo?
I think it's important to know that we are a single screen drive-in, and that's important because we're typically playing the really wide release movies. It's kind of rare that we encounter a title that is, a limited release that we can't get. Usually when we play like maybe a deeper cut neon or A24 film, we're not necessarily taking that on the break. It's not our number one feature. It's a co-feature like 3 or 4 weeks after it came out. So at that point, there's usually no issue with getting those titles. So it's rare that we personally struggle with that. Although we have encountered it on occasion, I really would suggest any small independent theater to explore a booker. I know a lot of small theaters and single screeners like to book movies on their own, and you can do that absolutely, but a booker definitely helps you navigate the complexities of the distribution system, especially how kind of backwards and archaic we all know it can be sometimes. It's very helpful just to have another brain in the mix that knows all those channels a little bit clearer than maybe you do. Because as an operator, you're focused on so many things. You got to make sure the facility's running. You got to make sure your customers are happy. You have to make sure everything is running smoothly. Don't put all your brain power into worrying about getting the movie. Put that on somebody else.
That being said, we do pick everything we're doing.
Yes.
We spend
talk about a model.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time coming up with our programming. We try to do a combination of new releases and older movies. We like to show retro movies. We like to do, little like marathon weekends and things like that with movies that people love and want to see on the big screen. So we spend a lot of time mapping out events and pairings and things like that. And then we send these like unhinged emails to our booker and we're like, can you make this happen? And he's like, oh my God.
So Lauren has a journal of it's this giant tome, and it's full of movies and their associated distributor. So when we're booking a new release movie, we can actually crack open this catalog and just go through and go, okay, what movies by this distributor can we bring in? This studio is easy to work with. Let's see what titles they have. And so we very much have kind of, I don't want to say mastered, but definitely fine-tuned the art of pairing new releases with older films for our co-feature. That's something that our audience really likes. It's a fun way to creatively book without breaking the bank and without kind of like getting too complicated with the minefield of new release distribution.
Because with drive-ins, we do double features, and that can be very tricky to navigate with 2 different studios or 2 semi-new releases and things like that. So going back, that is really helpful to have a booker who understands that, especially who's skilled with drive-ins in particular and the weird nuances that come along with that.
How often do you guys pull your audience to figure out some of your programming strategies down the line? Or how involved are your customers in figuring that aspect of your business out?
Oh, all the time. Again, we're very active on social media. So sometimes we post videos and we say, like, here's a movie. We don't know if we want to show it. What do you think? And then, let people weigh in. But we also have a survey on our screen at the theater. So, like, you have to physically be in the theater. It's not just on the internet for random people to answer. But it asks about upcoming movies, what you're interested in, which of these new releases would you like to see on the screen? And it also gives us a chance to find out a little bit more about the customer, their demographics, how far they traveled, how old they are, and things like that. So that's definitely very, very helpful, because if nobody is answering a certain movie, then maybe we don't take that, or vice versa, gauge interest in certain things. I mean, that also gives them an opportunity to talk about the older movies that they want to watch too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have options on our website to reach out to us. We're you can contact us anytime, and sort of we do have a drop down for movie suggestions. We get a lot of movie suggestions, and so while we can't always pull all that off, it's great feedback for us to kind of see, like, okay, what's the general vibe of our audience? What are they looking for? What are they excited to see?
In terms of programming and special nights and finding that co-feature, what has worked exceptionally well for you guys? And if you're open to sharing it, I always like to do this. What did you think would work and didn't? And in hindsight, you're like, oh, well, we didn't pay attention to that little detail. Sometimes asking about the misses can be a little bit more valuable than the hits.
So I think a surprise hit we had was The Thing.
Yeah.
Our first winter, we had like negative 15-degree weather in January. And since it was our first year, we didn't know what to do. So we decided to show The Thing.
It's the best snow movie ever. That's a great call.
Exactly.
Yeah, John Carpenter, monsters coming out of stomachs. Yeah. I love it.
We ended up getting a surprise, enormous turnout. And it's now become an annual thing. So we just did our third one, and it's grown every year. And despite the fact that it's freezing outside, people show up and watch it and
it's
love
the true 4D experience.
Yeah, Lauren, that's the point. That's what you want out of watching The Thing.
Standing in the freezing snow, staring up at a giant screen with Kurt Russell in the Arctic tundra. It's just surreal. And I think that kind of seasonal programming really resonates with people. And we do that almost for every time of year. Even in December, where we have the winter solstice and the sunsets are especially early, we do drive-in matinees. We have 5 o'clock showtimes of holiday movies. And that has also kind of become sort of a fun tradition for area families to come out and enjoy the drive-in in a traditional off-season.
Is there something that hasn't worked well? I'm trying to think.
Well, something that I think hasn't performed quite the way we thought it would is the horror programming we've done in October.
That's true.
Which is we're still trying to figure this out. This is a mystery.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's never going to work, but you have to find the formula, because you're competing against everyone on that theme in that date. If you're leaning into an outdoor experience in January to watch The Thing, that's yours. You lean into it, you own it. And I absolutely love the way you guys did that. But you're right. Sometimes the obvious things can be the most challenging ones. Like, how do you stand out in Halloween?
At my old drive-in, and during the time I was running, I still run pop-up movies, but when we were doing it full time, horror was a bread and butter. That was like almost a guaranteed hit. And now we're finding it's not, which is very interesting and very indicative that our audience is different at this theater. We've
really cultivated something new, and so we have to figure out what they actually
they want.
Yeah.
and sometimes horror lands and it's great. The Thing is a great example of that. But we do find that, especially in that fall season where there is a lot of competition for horror screenings, how do you stand out? And we're still working on that. That's kind of a point of discovery for us, for sure.
And this is, I think, a big question for a lot of movie theater operators today. You hear a lot about alcohol service. You hear a lot about expanded menus and concessions. It can be a bit of a headache figuring out, how deep do you want your menu to go? What is right for my theater and my audience? How did you guys develop your snack bar? And can you tell me a little bit of what that strategy entails? Because there is such a thing as doing too much. Well, there's also the risk of, are we not doing enough?
Shankweiler's has like the world's smallest drive-in concession stand. It's tiny.
It's from 1955 is when this building was built.
It is a full kitchen. Like, it's a full service snack bar. We do have like a menu with complete meal options, but it's a very, very small space. So for us, that's our number one limiting factor. And there's not a lot we can do about that because it's a cinder block building. And, we're paying a giant commercial loan. So we don't have the capital to rebuild that building right now. Doing the classics and doing them well. I think that is the most important thing. Have good popcorn. If you have a full kitchen, cook good burgers. Try to get a vegetarian or vegan option in there. I think Lauren can speak to this journey better than I can of the veggie dog.
Yeah. I mean, I don't eat meat. So going to drive-ins, especially, like, my options were always a soft pretzel or popcorn. And then I'm like, okay, well, what else can I eat? So immediately I started testing out different veggie dogs to see what would work in our kitchen with our equipment. So I tried a whole bunch. We found a good one. Now we serve it. And people love having that option. So even though that's not something that like revolutionized the menu and is like groundbreaking for the people who really wanted it, like it is. I think.
Yeah, no, we get a lot of positive feedback about the hot dogs specifically. It's really interesting. It's kind of it's a little thing, but it's showing that we hear people, we understand our audience needs, and we're trying to provide for that. We right away made a lot of improvements to just food prep and how it's stored and how it's presented to create a better, fresher product. And I think a lot of like old school operators have this mentality of kind of like get the food out there, get the people fed, but not really thinking about like, well, how does it taste? How does it look? It's got to be something that people want to eat. And so I kind of came in with like, I want a good like fast food burger. I want something that I can just like stuff in my face and enjoy. And I'm not looking for like 5-star like boutique gourmet, but I want something that someone can hold and enjoy with their movie and feel like, oh, this is a nice cheeseburger. And I think we've achieved that.
Mm-hmm. We also supplement our menu since we do have a small kitchen. We work with a lot of local food trucks who come in, and they're not things that are going to cut into our food sales. They're things that support it or that supplement it. So ice cream trucks do great. Shaved ice do great. Really any dessert. So it's another attraction. It makes things a little bit different. It can be themed. Like when we did Barbie, we had an ice cream truck that had like pink ice cream and went along with that. And that gives everybody a little extra food that we don't have the room for. We also do that with alcohol because we don't have a liquor license, but
we're in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. In Pennsylvania, local breweries, distilleries can get expo licenses where they're able to travel around and do pop-ups. And so we've developed a lot of relationships where people will come and do that, and we get themed drinks and, they serve it and handle all of that. But it's another offering that we're not equipped to do ourselves, but that we're able to give to our customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to touch on is if you can't diversify, find someone who can and bring them in, because that's an added incentive. And we find that when we bring in like a sweet treat, like an ice cream or a cold offering in the summer, our savory food sales skyrocket. So things like burgers, hot dogs, and fries, even the popcorn go up. So
kids get all hyped up on sugar, run around a lot, and then they're hungry again.
There's definitely a opportunity for like some symbiotic partnerships with other local businesses. And that's also very good optics. When you work with local companies, whether that's a food truck or a brewery, that's staying in your community, and your community sees that and responds to it. And so we really put ourselves on a pedestal of community involvement and support. And the community has responded to that, and in turn it supports us. And I think that that's very much kind of a key to diversifying your offerings a little bit without having to like completely uproot your infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, you have to do what makes sense, not only for you guys as a building. You mentioned, hey, we've got a small space. It doesn't make sense for us to redo everything. It makes a lot more sense to cater to our community with these local partnerships. I think that's the future of independent cinemas.
You can make a lot of things work. And I think there's a lot of focus right now, especially with like the larger, more mid-sized chains, I would say, that to kind of convert their spaces into the so-called family entertainment centers, the FECs.
That's
There's
a
a
big
lot of
buzzword.
buzzwords
Yeah.
happening, premium large formats, FECs, PLFs. That
Listen,
stuff is great.
I'm halfway guilty for that because our publication does a lot of that, but I hear you.
Very important evolution and absolutely a path to growth. But to be very honest, small independent theaters do not have the capital to go and make those kind of upgrades, and Main Street theaters physically don't have the space for it. So what Lauren and I are trying to do is find ways to make the infrastructure that you have and the resources that are available to you now work and provide more revenue paths. Because I think that's what owning an independent theater is all about. It's all about sort of innovating in a cost-effective way and in a realistic way. And a lot of that is just being very scrappy and working with your community. And I think that's always been our goal here, is to kind of evolve without breaking the bank.
Yeah, being realistic with it.
Yeah, and understanding the limitations of what you can do with your space, but also unearthing some of the potential that you may not have seen before. Because one of the great things about owning a theater, indoor or out, you're sitting on prime venue space. You're sitting on a gathering space for the community. And that can be so many things. So you can start peeling back the layers to what that is. And it's different for everybody.
And a huge thank you to Lauren and Matthew from Shankweiler's Drive-In. Earlier, you heard from my colleague Chad Kennerk and our friend Albert Lawrence. On behalf of everyone this week, thank you for listening to the Box Office Podcast. We are back next week with a new episode every Thursday, so don't forget to subscribe, and we will talk to you again next week.